Oh, there's no. Okay, well, on the count of three, we have to do the blanc. Okay? 1, 2, 3.
Solid.
That's what happens when you let this guy drive. Doesn't know how to do any of the effects. And that's what happens when other people like take off for a fancy camping weekend and let this guy and then swoop in at the end like, I'm here, guys.
We'll put it in post.
I may have broken some land speed records to get home, but I wanted to talk to you guys about this.
Exactly. Welcome to Momentous Live, episode 14. We're our WWDC21 OStravaganza, because it's all operating systems all the time this week. And this WWDC, no hardware announcements, much to the chagrin of some folks. This is Apple's annual worldwide developers conference. Sometimes they announce hardware, but primarily it's a developer-focused event. So they chose this year to focus just on software, which leaves the opportunity for maybe some July announcements, which we will talk about maybe in a little bit. But today we have regulars, Tasia Custodi, William Silver, Gray Williams, and special guest, fresh off the boat/plane, Jarome Matthew from ProSoul Studios, from his Beijing, formerly from the Beijing headquarters, which he still has there. Now it's the satellite office, now Vancouver area headquarters. Welcome back, Jarome. Great to have you here.
Yeah, finally, yeah. 10 years. It's about time.
And maybe if we have time allows, you can tell us about some of the cool projects you've been doing with at your studios, ProSoul. But real quick, before we jump into the Apple stuff, how was it getting back from Beijing to Vancouver? How long did it actually take you?
Oh, it took, well, if you count when I planned to originally come, like over a year. Thank you, pandemic. And then more recently, it was weeks because the first 3 flights got canceled.
And you're
for a very interesting reason.
Yeah. Which was?
Political relations between China and Canada are not so good at the moment. Right. Air Canada basically forced Chinese airlines to stop flights. So interesting complications going on there.
Good times.
Yeah.
Well, Apple is no stranger to interesting complications in China, such as having to host iCloud servers there and whatnot. But that's not the subject of our...
I use them.
There you go. And they've had access to all your fun stuff. So today we're going to talk about things like iOS 15, iPadOS 15, macOS with a special name, which we'll reveal in a moment, watchOS 8, and more. But let's start with iOS 15. And let's see if I can hit the right switch here. Look at that. I didn't screw it up, Gray. Everything you need to know about Apple's new iOS 15. All sorts of fancy new features, including some FaceTime enhancements, focus features, notification cleanups. Apple's been battling notifications for ages. Some live text stuff, visual lookups, Safari redesigns, Apple Maps enhancements, weather, and so on. But I know a little birdie who may be currently working on a video on this topic and can walk us through what she thinks are some of the highlights of iOS 15 so far.
Would that birdie be me?
Could be.
It could be. Okay, let's take a minute to just respect and talk about all of the FaceTime updates, because there are many and they are amazing. So, like, there's a couple things, like, I know Gray's going to have some things to say on the spatial audio about it all, but they are working on, a spatial audio update. So it's going to, they're trying to make you feel like more connected with people that you're having your FaceTime with via this. There's going to be new mic filters. So you actually be able to toggle on or off something called voice isolation. And basically it'll help like dampen the background noise. So like, I don't know, my Mac sounding like a jet engine right now taking off. It might be nice to just tamper that a little bit. But you can also toggle it off if you kind of want more of like that real audio sound and you want your background noise in there for some reason. But there's a couple other really cool FaceTime features that you really can tell Apple is trying to compete with the big boys. They want to compete with Google Meet. They want to compete with Zoom. And it's all about how to do this way easier for the user while you're on the go, using your device you would always use anyway with your FaceTime, which you'd be used to anyway. So they're going to be doing a grid feature now. So basically everybody in the chat's going to have their own little tile, and you can move your tiles around just like you can on like Zoom, which is kind of a fun thing. But now you are also going to be able to schedule a FaceTime, yes, and add it to your calendar and then share it. And the la pièce de la résistance, as they say, is you can use FaceTime. You will be able to use FaceTime on a web browser now, including in Windows and on Android devices, meaning you could share these links with anybody, regardless of whether or not they're on iOS.
But they still don't get a blue bubble. No iMessage for you.
It's kind of interesting because this was the 10-year anniversary of Steve Jobs' last WWDC. And if you remember, he promised that FaceTime would be basically an open source, open access platform, right? It was supposed to be that it would be available to Android, available to Windows. And unfortunately, there were some patent problems that came along with that, changed the way that FaceTime worked entirely. And it really it suffered in the first few years. And so here on the 10-year anniversary of Steve's last WWDC, for Tim and company to walk on stage, well, Craig to walk on stage and basically say, we're delivering on that promise. It's a decade late, but we were finally able to deliver on that promise. I kind of choked up a little bit. Like, this is, FaceTime for me it's a phenomenal experience, right? Like it feels good to use FaceTime. And so using Zoom feels corporate. Right, Google Meet has never really worked for me, but
watch yourself.
But like FaceTime for me is family, and so being able to schedule things is great. Like I can tell my mom, I'm going to call you at 7. It's going to show up in her calendar. The voice isolation is great as well because when you're walking down the street in Vancouver, you got your AirPods on. I FaceTime audio because it's far better quality than a telephone call. And half the time I hear my father say, I can't hear you. Oh, okay, great. So having something to block that out, but like all of this stuff, this really is the next generation of FaceTime. I'm so excited.
And in the demo, they had someone with a leaf blower in behind for effect, and they're using the same kind of noise canceling, I suppose, that for the listener, also as for the person on the other end of the call.
Yeah, well, NVIDIA had something like this that they were using with their RTX cards. And they've had a bunch of streamers on there where they've had people with things like leaf blowers and old recordings done on Cherry, and basically they're able to block that stuff out. And so I'm like the system on a chip, like with the iPad and the iPhone, and I guess the new M1 Max, the fact that it's able to deliver that kind of processing in a mobile device and it's not sucking battery, like that's some pretty impressive tech.
And actually, Graham, too, speaking of like some processing, the one thing I forgot to mention was, we all know how we can use portrait mode for still photos. You're going to be able to use that now in FaceTime, which like everybody clamored to, how do I blur my background? Or how do I change my background? Or how do I, blah? And so now it's just like, hey, like we've got this down pat. It's so fast now that we're going to do this live.
Yeah,
it's no longer just a still photo. Exactly. So that was another really cool feature.
And using the cameras and the sensors, the front-facing camera and sensors on most modern iPhones, you're going to get a lot better effect than you are on just your modern, your everyday potato cam on most laptops nowadays, where a lot of the blurred backgrounds are just not that great. Oh. The cutout of the individual, unless they're in front of a green screen, is pretty dodgy at best. Yeah. One of the other great features of iOS 15 that they demoed was live text and spotlight search. What's the deal there, Tasia?
Yeah, so the live text is supposed to be, you'll be able to take a picture of something or even use existing photos, so old photos you already have in your app, and you'll be able to copy and paste out text from that. So if you think of like a recipe or a logo or a street sign or whatever you can think of that would have text in it, you'll be able to copy it and paste it out into other applications, which could be really useful if you want to copy a number from something and you just like have your phone to quickly take a snapshot of somebody's business card. Like I do that all the time. And so it's like, oh, now I can just copy this number and boom, I can just paste it and make the phone call or add them to my contacts. So that's really neat. And it's super cool that it works somewhat retroactively, like with already existing photos.
And it showed in the demo that you could just go to the photo and just basically drag your cursor as if it was regular text in, say, Microsoft Word, and it finds the text on that image. And then, like you said, you can copy and paste it elsewhere. A lot of people derided Apple for supposedly being behind everyone else when it came to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. But they were doing a lot of stuff quietly behind the scenes. And some of these things have been bearing fruit over the last few years. And they're able to do a lot of the stuff on device without having to go to the cloud as much. And that's going to relate to a story we're going to touch on a bit later, too. But you wonder if they're kind of nipping at the heels almost with Google, with the Google Lens and Google Translate to be able to do that, have that kind of functionality. Jarome, real quick, well, your time in Asia, and not just China, but in the surrounding countries when you're traveling, how often did you use an app like Google Lens, Google Translate to actually look at signs, and have them translate on the fly? Did you do that at all?
All the time, yeah. I was just thinking about how it was really cool and good, but it was kind of clunky compared to what they demoed with this live text. It sort of works, and it doesn't have the control you have with live text. It's just sort of you hold up the camera and it flickers some letters and you hopefully can get a gist of the translation. But this live text is on a whole nother level, and I think it's so like exactly what you said, and in the audio as well, showing that Apple's been really working on AI, because this audio stuff you're listening to, what they're doing is basically AI analyzing thousands of samples of voice and speech and audio, because I use technology that uses this, and it's isolating what's the human voice element of those in different types of background environments, and it's hard to do that real time. I mean, the processing I use, it's you basically have to do it like process it, and it's not real time. So to do this in real time is quite impressive, and it shows serious tech,
Exactly. So to be clear, translation features aren't a part of this feature yet, but you could very easily see this coming down the road. So speaking of machine learning and what's going on, Tasia, there's another interesting feature which appears to use machine learning in iOS 15. It's visual lookup. What does that do? We saw something similar from Google recently like this, didn't we?
Oh, I'm not really too familiar with the visual lookup. It wasn't one of my top picks this week. You'll have to watch my video to see what my top picks are. Gray, do you know?
Yeah, well, this is a little like Google goggles, right? And so you're able to look at something. And they had some examples here like Lilacs and the Golden Gate Bridge. And really, the neural engine is kind of working overtime on this thing. They connect you through to, obviously, like informational articles. This is sort of they've had the promise of this with third-party apps, and with like Google's done it, and it's been done okay. I had a plant identifying app that I think worked about 30% of the time.
Yeah.
So something like this is basically being able to take a look at anything in a scene, tap that thing, and have that thing be identified, and potentially be able to connect with what it is. Really, really cool technology. I'm interested to see how deep it goes. Because right now, the things that they're showing us, okay, here's a breed of dog. I can't do that myself. So that's really great. You're in the park and you're like, oh, that's a something cross. Great, fantastic. Now I can talk to the owner with some sort of authority on that. I still won't, but I mean, the things that we're looking at here in their examples seem fairly mainstream. So I wonder how far down the rabbit hole does it go. I'm fascinated to find out.
Well, it's always. Like with any kind of thing like this too, and I totally agree with you, Gray, is I used to have this all the time with Adobe product launches, where it'd be like, oh, that's such an amazing feature, and then you actually get your hands on it and be like, oh, unless you do exactly what they did, it will not work.
And lab environment.
Yeah. So, and the same with like what Jarome was talking about with the translate. Like when it's in demo, it works perfect. If you go anywhere a little bit on either side of what they did, it starts like sketching out a bit. So, you know, sometimes things do work perfectly, but you always got to be a little bit careful. Like you say, when you start actually putting it through its paces and using it in the real world, you find out the limits of some of these things.
Yeah.
That everything looks great in a demo. Everyone looks great on a resume, right? So,
well, and don't get me wrong. Like I think this is going to work, but I'm wondering how strange and weird can you get? Like if you've got an action figure from 1983 that saw one season of a cartoon, you're able to shoot that, and they get it. That will have satisfied my inner child. But
That would be creepy.
but it's also
Like, who's in there?
Yeah, but
How
it's
do you
also
know
again
this?
like how necessary is that? If they've got the mainstays, I think for the vast majority of people out there, this is gonna be a huge hit as a feature. So very neat.
But it seems a lot like it's like, forgive me, you know where I'm going with this.
Does it start with G and rhyme with Schmoogle?
It really seems like they're doing a lot of things that Google had implemented years ago.
Yeah. Well,
Who can do it better, though? is
Google
going to
designs,
be
Apple refines.
a big question.
No, it's the same thing I was thinking
Okay.
about Zoom. You know, Zoom, everyone's been using Zoom in the last year, and you're like, wow, this is a cool feature, and this is like so sophisticated, and you're like, okay, well, come on, Apple, you know, we need these features too.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
I just circle back on something Gray said as well? Just a little side point about the action figure identification. So the only thing is, I have pictures of action figures on my phone. Don't judge. And they think that they're real people. So when I go out to like people you know, it'll have like, so I can name
Sergeant Slaughter. Wow.
Yeah, Sergeant Slaughter. I do have 6 photos of Sergeant.
Snake Eyes.
Right next to Tristan and Gray and Tasia and my wife and my mother, there's a little picture and my people I know.
I did want to just touch on one thing, which is, you know, like bring this feature to this device. It happened with notifications. It's happening here with a lot of features as well, where everyone's like, Google did it first. And Google does things. They do things very well. Like there are like millions and millions of happy Android users out there. I go back to the example of the calculator on the iPad. You know, when they were asked about this, I can't remember if it was Phil Schiller or whoever it was, but they said, like, why is there no calculator app on the iPad? I think it was Craig, actually. And he said, to be honest, like, there was one right up until the iPad was about to launch. And Steve looked at it and went, you've just blown up the iPhone calculator. Scrap it. Take it out. It's not good enough. And so at that point, it became, well, we're only going to introduce this thing when we can do something special with it. We actually make it earn its place here. And so with a lot of features, I think, and this is kind of going back to what we're talking about visual lookup, they want to get it right. They don't always, but I'd say with a lot of features that they've looked at over the course of the last 10 years, they have, when they launch it, it launches. Notifications is one of those that I'm a little 50-50 on, but the new update looks like we're actually going to get some things that, again, Android's had for a very long time, but Apple's finally found a way to make this work for an iPhone audience.
Another kick at the can.
Yeah.
Tasia, if you had to choose one more feature from the iOS 15 update, what would it be?
Probably SharePlay.
What's
I thought that was a really cool feature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to allow users in FaceTime to group watch together something. And also you could act as a presenter and like share a screen. So it's going to work with like, you know, Apple TV, Apple Music apps, Hulu, Disney Plus. Like there's like a list of all kinds of compatible apps. But I just thought that was really cool. You know how like kind of like how Netflix and them are doing like watch parties and stuff. But it's just another cool way to like bring people together when we live all far away and we want to like do something at the same time. Because like my family and I watch stuff together all the time. But by watch together, I mean like we have it recorded and then we text each other and we're like, okay, play. And then we both hit play where we're just like texting. So it'd be super fun to be able to do like an actual FaceTime watch party. So I will be doing that.
Okay, yeah, it's a great name too. I mean, they've got AirPlay already, and SharePlay. It seems like a no-brainer
Yes.
for the shared watching
Somebody
experience.
got a bonus for that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's right there.
That's actually, I really love that idea. I was actually just on a watch along on the soccer podcast that I occasionally contribute to called the AFTN, which I think I mentioned before. And one of the things, I've been on a couple of these, I think the last one was maybe around December, where we watched a soccer game and 4 or 5 of us just sort of chat like like we do. But the funny thing is, often periodically we have to call out, what time are you on the game? Like 1 minute 34 seconds or something, because none of us are on the same, because we're either on going off an Xbox or going off our computer or going off the television or something like that. So it'd be nice to actually stream it all together. And I know we could work it out. I try to encourage Michael of AFTN to figure it out, but that might make it an easier feature.
Well, Plex has had a feature like this for a while, right? And so essentially what it does is it does time slipping, and it almost inserts frames and kind of speeds things up and slows them down so that your stream fits together. I've got a friend of mine who lives here in Vancouver who was watching something with somebody in Australia and said, it's perceptible at that point, but when you're watching things, across the same city, it's not. So I would imagine that Apple is doing the same sort of thing here, but from the way that they're talking about it, the quality is, fantastic. The thing that got me as well is that they've opened an API up here. This is the developers conference, and they basically said, here, we've built the framework. Now go do other things with this. And I think there's a lot of folks out there. Like when you think about this, SharePlay, could this be a Twitch competitor? Could you be streaming to a mass group of people that are all watching and involved at the same time? I think there's a lot of opportunity here for developers to do some great stuff, and obviously for end users, we're gonna love this. So, Teja, Mandalorian season 3, yeah.
Sure.
Get caught up. You got time.
So moving on to iPadOS 15, which shares a number of features. That's one of the common themes with WWDC this year is here's a new feature and it's on iOS, iPadOS, and macOS, and maybe even others too. So there's a lot of sharing of the wealth between the teams. Now, Will, you're a longtime iPad user. Anything jump out at you in terms of interesting announcements for iPadOS 15?
Yeah, so I mean, quite a few things. I think maybe I'll sum it up by saying that I think the major overarching theme is, as they like to say, versatility, but also extending the use of the iPad. And this seems to be a very common theme and maybe a little bit of a thing that they're playing off like with the Microsoft Surface in terms of almost using an iPad as, dare I say, a bit of a replacement, or people who use an iPad maybe in replacement of a desktop or particularly a laptop. And it's added some features to help with that. Now, one of the things when I was watching, the presentation and some of the things I read after, a couple of people were kind of being snarky about how many times have I heard that Apple is getting better at the iPad and it's going to replace my laptop. I think to Gray's point earlier, I mean, they're refining, and I think there's a lot of things, and certainly as we discussed a few weeks ago, the power of the M1 chipset and some of the features of the new iPad Pro, I mean, it's pretty beefy, and I think that we're getting closer and closer. And might I add, I also worked in an organization that tried to use Surfaces as laptop replacements. Let me tell you, it didn't go so well. So whoever says that it's perfect on the Surface, particularly someone like me who uses fairly high-powered apps like After Effects and Premiere, many of those things don't work very well on Surface, if at all. So I think the iPad and this update on iOS 15, iPadOS 15, it's pretty good overall. One of the things that they're really trying to do is multitasking, and part of that is the split screen. They've introduced something called a shelf, so you can have your different split screens and sort of switch between them
more easily too, because the interface was a little opaque previously, hard to discover, and now they've got some actual buttons you can tap for your different split screen configurations, right?
Exactly, and that was one of the problems I had with the split screen, is that if you put it away, you almost had to go out of the app that you were in and go to all your open apps and then select that other window that you sent away, right? For example, if you're using Safari or something like that. They've also added this concept of widgets, and that you can put them on different screens, group them together in sort of app libraries, have them different sizes. So you could have something that was all images or something like that, and just have a bigger display on certain ones and certain apps and things like that. Another big thing that they're trying to, I think, incorporate are aspects that go across different devices. So notes across different devices and apps. So the notes feature, particularly quick notes, which I thought was really cool. I don't know what you guys thought about it, but being able to add notes to, say, something in your browser or on other apps, and have that as part of the Notes app on your device, and even share it with cross-platform, I thought was really amazing.
Yeah, specifically having the thing with the pencil, like all you needed to do is swipe up from the lower right corner,
yes,
and you could start like just handwriting a note right there, and it would integrate, like you said, into your Notes app across devices.
So exactly, like even when I was watching WWDC, you could just swipe up and with the pencil just make some notes on things that you were watching, and it would actually link to that part, which is pretty cool. And that's part of also with the notes is you can add mentions, you can add tags, and that sort of increases the functionality. I use my Notes app all the time, and I know that we use it for the show even, in terms of coming up with ideas and things like that. So I think anything that adds to that makes it easier to use. Multitasking, I think it's really a plus. And then they briefly mentioned some things with Translate, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just having more integration system-wide. They're also talking about automatically, so we'll see how well that works. But also, I think that ties into things like notes, but it seems to be sort of, my impression was it was sort of across the whole iPad device. Is that correct, Tristan? Was that your understanding as well?
I'm just trying to
work across.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because this is actually Apple's admission that they had a gesture set that failed. Right? Multitasking last year. Even last week, I still don't have iPadOS 14 multitasking figured out.
Neither do I.
Things up, and they pop up in the side view, and then you kind of pull at it, and then occasionally it locks in.
And it disappears.
Terrible. It was terrible. Like it was. I would say that it was almost consumer hostile, user hostile. So this new feature is great. But they've also now said that we've got a gesture set that works with the Apple Pencil, and that's this swipe in from the bottom left to the bottom right. The bottom left gives you a screenshot. The bottom right gives you a quick note. And so we're giving users this great new gesture feature, but also taking this horrible one away. Bless you, Apple. I will say that this is one of these things where it's like, okay, so you gave me iOS features from last year in this year's update. Thank you. I've been waiting a year for widgets. The today screen's great, but why? Like, I'm not really sure why that took so long. And I'm sure there are reasons under the hood. I mean, obviously they've got these new bigger widgets that they're playing with. It's great. But for me, the multitasking is the big one because I do use it, and it's been painful. So this is I'm thrilled with this one.
Go ahead, Will.
I was going to say there's just two last features too. I have to agree exactly what Gray said. I mean, the multitasking. I loved where they were going with it, but it just wasn't fully baked. So now, hopefully, it's fully baked, or it sounds like it's fully baked. The two other things that they also mentioned was Swift Playgrounds, which I thought was really interesting about developing apps or iPad apps on the iPad. I mean, pretty amazing there. And then just, I know we'll probably mention this a little bit later, but I do have to give a shout out for using a mouse across devices, including an iPad.
Yeah.
How long have I wanted to do that, where I could just swipe my mouse between my iPad and my MacBook? I mean, that to me is crazy. Now, I know it's not necessarily part of this iOS iPad announcement, but I just couldn't talk about iPad without bringing that up because it's probably the thing that I was most excited about with all of this.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a sec. Well, one of the interesting sort of gripes that people have about the iPadOS 15 is that it feels like the iPads are so powerful now, especially the iPad Pros that were just, iPads Pro, like Governors General, that were just announced a few weeks ago, and Graham has one now, the 11-inch model, I believe. They're so powerful, and it feels like iPadOS has yet to catch up with that power. We're seeing some baby steps now with Swift Playground making it to iPadOS now. But what about things like Final Cut, Logic? Some serious versions of the Pro apps out there. Now, Tasia, you really quickly, I know that you are a diehard MacBook user. What would it take for you to start using an iPad more?
I mean, I have one that I use, but like for my line of work, like video production, nothing. I can't only rely on the iPad. Their cameras aren't great still, so I can't do video with it. And so
which iPad are you using?
So,
don't use the $300 one for video. Use an iPad Pro for $2,000.
Like the one with the LiDAR built in, the 12 megapixel, that one?
Yeah, I don't have the iPad Pro, so for me, it's just like I can't. I watch my workout videos on my iPad, and I surf. Yeah, and I surf Chrome. I really don't. I do use it though for slating videos. I will say there's a good iPad app for slating videos. Groundbreaking stuff here, ladies and gentlemen. Groundbreaking stuff.
I've
been meaning to break this out for a while here. So
yeah, you don't need that.
There we go.
For that.
I like the tactile feel.
I'm with you though. I'm with you though, Tasia. I mean that's one of the big things. I use the iPad for personal entertainment device, but in terms of doing serious work, I've tried a couple times. I have a pencil and just done various things with Adobe apps that they've tried to use, and admittedly I haven't used any of their apps in probably 2 years, but the last time I did, they're basically like fun apps or things that you could kind of play around with and maybe tweak something, but not something you'd seriously produce work at a level that you could on a MacBook Pro.
There's a lot of people
it's also size though too. Like I can't, when you're editing or when you're doing, whether I can't work on a screen that small. It's not possible.
That was actually my biggest complaint.
Soup it up all they want, but
the thing is, the new M1 can drive a 6K display, right? It's the same as the MacBook Air, and so right now the iPad does screen mirroring. We were hoping to get desktop extension because right now, if you put it onto a wide screen, you don't get a 16:9 image. You get this 4:3 or whatever the ratio is on the iPad. So you get the black bars on the side. And that one seemed like an easy win to me. Now, here's the thing. Apps can be coded to use the full display if you were plugged into an external display. So I'm looking at the iPad right now and going, so what would it take to get Final Cut on here? Because we have things like USB and Thunderbolt 4 support for high-speed data input-output. You've got folks that are using these in music studios. You've got folks that are using these in film studios. The color on the Pro XDR display, or the Liquid XDR display on the 12.9-inch Pro is amazing. There's some folks talking about bloom, but really, this is one of the best displays. It's the best portable display on the market.
I loved him in Pirates of the Caribbean.
So just look at this. I'm wondering, people are waiting for this, and so what's Apple's holdup for? Because Final Cut's really the big one, I think, for a lot of people. Logic would be a cool one for me. I get to use my iPad as a Logic remote. That's fun. I can basically use it like a mixing board. Great. But it feels like it's missing a lot of those. There's something, and it didn't get there this year.
Can I say too? I had a fun experience. I agree with Tasia on also the size of the display and whether it work or not. I had a fun experience once when I was at work. We went for a work lunch, and someone had messed something on a website on our CMS. I actually had to go on my phone and pinch open and try to code HTML into the source view and pinch because it was a critical communication. So size does matter. Screen display size does matter.
Fair.
If I may, hate to digress, may I take the opportunity to try and one-up you just a little bit on that?
Please.
One
up away.
2006, I think, pre-iPhone, on a Trio 650 in England. What was I doing? VNCing into my server at home, which was having trouble. We were getting attacked. Like I don't know if it was what sort of attack, but we were getting all sorts of queries, and I had to like just block all these IP addresses. I was doing the same kind of thing, but on a far crappier interface. On the other side of the world, like I said, VNC graphical interface zooming around on my server screen because I'm not really that great on the command line, and it was just like, anyway. So
you were probably on edge data
status.
Yeah, exactly.
The trios were amazing, though. I love those things.
You should have seen the roaming bell.
So, Jarome, you're in sound. Like, are there people in your field that are using iPads? Like, because I'm seeing a lot of artists that are, but.
Well, for serious work like composing, production, you can't really just use an iPad. Although a lot of the developers I use of software I use, they do come out with iPad versions of the tools. I think they're trying to break into the market, a new market, or people who have want to use an iPad, but they're more practical as, let's say, a controller, a Bluetooth controller for your Zoom recorder, or a drum machine, like a software version of your favorite drum machine that doesn't exist anymore. That kind of thing is where it's really being used, and in many cases too, as a third or fourth monitor for just, let's say, your meters, your audio meters, on the console. You just like dedicate it to that kind of thing, and so it has its uses, but it's not like the main engine or workstation, I don't think, for most people.
I see a way in for Tasia to get even more out of her iPad. We can make 5 out of 5 people here DJs. We just need you, Tasia.
Hey,
all the cool kids are doing it.
Jarome brings up a good point, because I do use mine for a lot of like assistive functionalities. So it's like I use it as a teleprompter. Yep. So it's like kind of like production assistant, but not for the actual production.
I actually
Yeah.
use my iPad as well as you can almost, I forget the name of the app. I can drag it up later, but I actually use it as almost like a Cintiq tablet, where you can control Photoshop. But again, that's more of like an interface than actually having Photoshop open on your.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I think there's still lots of untapped potential in the iPads, especially the iPads Pro. Hopefully, iPadOS 16 in a year will deliver on the promise of the hardware a little better, or maybe incremental updates to iPadOS 15 throughout the year. Apple's been dropping more features throughout the years now, mid-cycle now. So we'll see what the next few months hold for us. So let's move on to macOS, and I love it. I thought they were going to use this name last year, but they waited till this year. macOS Monterey. And they didn't talk a ton about it, but one of the key features in Monterey, which the demo was pretty darn cool, was universal control. Now, Jarome, you're a long time Mac user. I think you were my gateway drug into the Apple ecosystem. So back in the bad old days of Apple, when they were perpetually doomed, and I remember you rocking an Apple after you moved from the Atari. Was it 520 ST you had for music production? You moved over to the Mac 2CI, I believe. Is that?
Yeah, it was the 2CI. Was one of the early machines.
So we've come a long way. So what stood out for you in some of these macOS Monterey updates?
Well, I liked some of the universal control was definitely one of the main ones, because I like to give a client or coworker an iPad with data on it that they need, like even a script or something that they're going to read that we're recording. So it's pretty cool to be able to do that very easily, that kind of thing. So I think it shows a lot of promise.
Can you describe Can you describe more fully what they did in there? And while you're talking, I'll pull up a visual here.
No, going blank now. It's basically just makes it easier to transfer the what you're doing, between the devices, more than one device, the same OS running.
Yeah, it's almost like a virtual KVM switch. So if you throw your iPad beside your MacBook Pro, all of a sudden you can control your iPad through your keyboard and mouse and drag stuff over to your iMac or even to your MacBook or even your iPad.
Yeah, and it's always been kind of clunky when you use like AirDrop or even with iCloud, like notes and such. Sometimes it's slow, and it just seems like this is just a cooler, more modern way to transfer between the devices like really quickly and easily.
Yeah, we first saw stuff like this with Universal Clipboard, right? Which, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people don't really remember that it works. You copy something on your Mac.
I use it all the time, yeah.
And it's like the first time that I've showed that to some people, it feels like magic. This looks like magic. And it's just, you know, they're taking, I think it's the U1 chip and the H1, and they're all just kind of working together. And the idea of just drop it down, and it's there. Because right now, if you want to go and you want to add your iPad in, you go to your screen mirroring or screen sharing, and you click on it, and it adds the iPad in. So I've got my MacBook, my big monitor, my iPad, and you can kind of set them up that way. But just drop it down. Just drag the cursor over, and it's there.
It's so cool. It's high tech, you know?
Yeah.
Especially too, though, because like AirDrop is so faulty all the time.
AirDrop is so annoying. It's such a great idea, but it's so annoying.
Yes.
You know?
Like,
it's a different
half the
OS.
time-
Well, good luck, you know?
It's a 50-50. It's like, will it work today? Let's find out if Tasia restarts her Mac. Like every time, it's a good day. Oh baby, when it works, you're like, yes. I don't have to restart my Mac.
I always see my neighbors in AirDrop too. It's like, what?
Set that to contact zone.
Be careful what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Tell them to refine that a little bit.
I wonder what that's causing that for you, because I've never had it fail, and I've sent like
50-50 for me.
gigabytes of data, you know, like literally just, and
Yeah. Well,
No, and nothing works to fix it except restarting the MacBook Pro. I've tried it all, gentlemen, and nothing works.
We've all
And that
been
is the
there.
magic. It's like a magic thing. And then boom, I try the same thing after the restart. Works like
maybe
a gem.
Monterey will fix it.
Who knows?
I have
Every
to say
time
though,
I
like,
update my macOS, something breaks. So
right, and that's exactly the problem I have. And I think I should say at this point about macOS is in my field, you're 2 OSs behind if you want to make everything work well. And so
I hear you.
I didn't even want to run Catalina on my new machine, my new i9 iMac, which is a screamingly fast machine. But I had to. I could not run anything lower. It wouldn't allow me. So I was like, oh boy. And thank God there was a Catalina update, which fixed a lot of nasty issues. And it's beautiful. I love it. But it was a gamble. I was like really nervous because for my audio hardware software integration, you know, it's a little slow with the drivers. You want to make sure you're working with software that's been well tested and working. And so I don't upgrade. So I just salivate over these features that other people can freely upgrade, and I have to wait like a year to use them. But
Delayed gratification. It builds character.
They're just long-term beta
but
testing for you.
I'm just thinking how many other people have enjoyed just being able to plug in your device and it shows up, you know, in the Finder. Like I've been waiting for this for years in Catalina, and I was like, this is so cool. But I mean, I'm a bit slow to use this. But I have to say the Safari that they demoed as being new and improved and great, to me, I didn't think it was much of an improvement. Like for me, when you get too streamlined, it starts to be, well, where's the button that I want to find, you know, that I use all the time? And I felt like it was very slick looking and streamlined, but I felt like I'm going to have trouble using this because it's too streamlined. And sometimes that's a downgrade if there's, you know, they're too efficient and they make it look good versus functional. So to me, like functionality is more important than how it looks. So I don't know what you guys think about the new Safari, but I felt like, not sure.
They're in love with their sidebar. And it's, you know, I feel like Apple stop trying to make the sidebar happen. It's not going to happen. But I guess people use it. But every once in a while I turn it on. I'm like, oh, you're still here, huh? You didn't get deprecated. All right, fair enough. I mean, the tab grouping feature is great. I mean, we all know the folks out there who can never close their windows because Tristan.
No, but Catalina did a pretty good job of improving that from the other OSs, I felt.
But now, so what the Apple seems to be doing more and more is trying to compress things vertically, because most of their devices, like the laptops and iMacs, are widescreen. So they're trying to get us to use they're trying to get Gray to use the sidebar because you've got all this extra space on the sides, right? So meanwhile, they're compressing the top bar, and the tabs are like up beside like the address bar now, and it's stressing me out because I like to spread things out a bit. I don't mind losing a little bit. We are able to scroll pages still.
Yeah, exactly what I felt. Yeah.
So I mean, I hope it's not a case of form over function.
I have to say too. I mean, I think I feel Jarome in the sense that a little bit different, but I had this problem with Adobe all the time, especially like Photoshop and programs like that, Illustrator, that when they were on their 16-month release schedule, when there was a version every 16 months, it seemed like sometimes some versions they ran out of ideas and they would just change the information architecture, move items up or down, and add one filter, and then try to make that like that was a huge amazing thing and sell a new version of the software. It's like sometimes you just need to realize when an interface is done and it works and just move on.
The new features for the sake of new features is annoying,
Yeah.
So do you think the yearly release schedule is hurting? Like, would you be happy if they went back to something a little bit more paced?
I think they should do it when there's a problem. They shouldn't, like, if Safari is working, just using Safari as an example, if something is working, it's the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, if there's something new, like there's a new, as Tristan said, they're trying to make it for, portrait or landscape or what have you. Okay, maybe you need to do some tweaking, or maybe there's an improvement to the chipset or something like that you have to do an overhaul. But don't, as Jarome was saying, don't simplify things for the sake of simplifying them. Don't take things out if it's working fine. Now, it's hard to know when things are working fine, right? But that's where you need to do usability testing and things like that with your users and try to figure that out. And if nobody's lighting up your feedback forums or different avenues, like, this thing is broken or it sucks, maybe you should take that as a positive sign, not like, hey, we need to do more because people aren't talking about it.
I just want to know, like, has everybody had as much of a headache with Big Sur as I have had?
Yeah,
like,
I've had problems.
Like, Jarome, do not ever update to
No,
macOS
I've heard
Big Sur.
I've heard the news. I'm not upgrading. I can't deal with that.
And then once I got in, I was like, well, now I have to do the next update because it'll have bug fixes. And then that broke another thing. And then you're like, oh God, where does this end? Like, I can't.
There's that clipping we were talking about.
Well, you had the problem last week. Sorry, this is getting into inside baseball here.
That's what we're here for.
Problem last week. I almost didn't. I didn't tell anyone. I almost didn't make the show last week because I had to update 4 hours beforehand. It just auto updated. I pressed it. I by accident said auto update.
Auto update. No.
It's breaking for me. It's breaking the most random things that I wouldn't have thought could be affected by an OS, like something that's not connected to whatever version I'm running. So like, it's so bizarre to me that I just start Googling these things like, well, let's see if anybody else, and sure enough, it's always known problems. And I'm like, okay, something's up here. Apple, you could have just skipped right over Big Sur. Thank you very much. We would have waited.
Monterey.
Yeah, but now I'm like, do I do it? Could it get worse?
Well, the interesting thing is that there's not tons and tons of new features in Monterey. I think they're doing like a snow leopard approach where it's a lot of things under the hood and it's tweaks and refinements as opposed to rolling out huge new features. I mean, aside from the universal control that we've talked about, a lot of it's pretty low key, behind the scenes for developers. So maybe they're taking a breath here. And I think after Big Sur Gate, if we can make that a thing, it's probably good to take a beat before pushing too many major updates. I think this yearly release cycle doesn't mean they have to throw everything in the kitchen sink at the release. They can take a year to refine, just like even with iPadOS, like the last couple of years, it seems like they've been kind of taking a beat. But I mean, again, I'm in just because of the name. Now, to be fair, I only have Big Sur on one device so far, only on my M1 MacBook Air. And so far, so good. I hate what they've done with the changes with some notifications and some of the time options for being able to snooze stuff. It's really getting to me. And when I go back on my iMac with with Catalina, I still have all my options there, and I don't know. So it seems like one step forward, two steps back.
Can I
in
give
some
one
cases.
positive?
Okay.
And this is a
Sure.
super small positive about Big Sur.
We'll allow it.
When my notifications come up, it has a little X when I go over top of it, and I go, bye-bye notification. That's like the one positive that so far.
Agreed.
You know you can turn those off entirely, right?
Yes, I know. But I do like seeing them, but I just like to be able to...
So this is like self-flagellation. No, notification, it's got to go.
Bye. Bye.
Did you guys, did you see the thing with shortcuts? Do you guys use shortcuts on your iPhones?
I use one.
Yeah.
You use one?
I installed one actually installed one on Stephanie's iPad a few months ago that says something to her every time she plugs in the power and says something else to her every time she unplugs the power. I did that in the middle of the night once, and then next time in the morning when she went to do it, she's like, "What's going on with
I'm
it actually speaks aloud.
Because I use IFTTT for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And I use shortcuts on my iPhone for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And Automator for years was just one of those things that I could never really crack the nut on.
Yeah.
I just kind of was there, and I was like, I never really can make this work. Shortcuts, as soon as it came out on iOS and iPadOS, it was just like, yeah, this makes sense. Like, it's a visual workflow. And so this, I think, is going to be, this is one of those sort of stealth features that the folks who figure it out and use it, they're going to love it. This one's a big deal.
Well, and Shortcuts is huge. They bought another company and an app called Workflow a few years ago, and there were tons and tons of fans of that app to be able to automate certain routines on people's iPhones and iPads. So a lot of people were excited when they brought that into the Apple Fold and made it. It's Automator, but not Automator. I'm getting confused. Shortcuts, right? So Automator on the Mac has existed for years, and it kind of replaced AppleScript to a certain extent. It gave it more of a visual interface, but now Automator is still going to work, but it's going to be slowly replaced by Shortcuts. And again, it's what we're seeing a lot of this functionality spreading across all the devices, or most of the devices, iPhones, iPads, and Macs, which is great for us as users. So like things like our knowledge base in our heads, to a certain extent, muscle memory and whatnot, but just being able to set up things so they can run on any number of devices, even if they aren't running the exact same operating system. Because a lot of people are saying, well, when's the iPad going to run macOS? Or, when are they going to combine things? And, like Windows 8 style. And it's like, Apple's kind of doing their own thing, but they're sharing a lot of the functionality, a lot of the code base, and the actual hardware platforms down in the form of the M1 processor. So we're going to get a lot of those benefits without necessarily running the exact same OSs. Now, speaking of another Apple OS, watchOS saw an update with watchOS 8, including things like a new mindfulness app, tracking things like respiratory rate, adding additional workouts, new Photos app, editable messages using a digital pen. Have you ever tried to send text messages, either dictating or it's challenging, so that's welcome. Some HomeKit stuff, multiple timers, and one feature that I think Tasia is going to make use of on her Apple Watch is the portrait watch face. So people can put portrait photos overlaid on the time and date information, and she can have Google CEO Sundar Pichai right on her Apple Watch.
Yes. Now it would be, I would just rotate every day between a different Habs player. And that's what I would do for the remainder of the playoffs if I had that ability right now. And I would just go,
anything
today?
Anything jump out to you from some of these Apple Watch OS features for you, Tasia?
Actually, I am really excited for like extra workouts, because sometimes I have that as an issue when like I'm doing one and it's just not really, like sometimes I have to pick one that I think might be a similar output.
For me, it's yard work. I want to get credit for mowing the lawn. How come they don't have a yard work workout?
Yeah, so like there's no cleaning, which I find crazy, because like, dude, if y'all were scrubbing and vacuuming and laundry, like
I want to close my rings.
Yeah,
credit for that.
You need credit. So like there's ones like cleaning, exactly, yard work, stretching even. So like they do have yoga, but like it's not the same as if I just want to do, a long form stretch, which I do sometimes like on my foam rolling and I do some stretching. But anyway, that's the one I'm most looking forward to, I think. And also I have major issues sending messages sometimes, and it'll be like, I'll tap it, or I'll be like, send, and I like keep putting my hand down and nothing's happening. I'm like, hello, and then Siri will just come back on like, I didn't catch that. And I'm like, stop it, send my message. So it's wonderful technology, but sometimes it's just me having a seizure trying to get a message sent.
Well, the timers thing is the one where I've got the watch going, I've got the iPad going, I've got the iPhone going. Oh, what does it? We're back. Sorry, Jerome, you're going to say something.
People with fat fingers like mine. That's why we don't have iWatch yet.
Going into the workouts, one of my major complaints about my Fitbit is it thinks that when I'm DJ scratching, like when I'm actually practicing, it thinks that I'm cycling sometimes. And so my wife is like, those aren't real steps. That's not real. You didn't actually climb any stairs. You got to take that off. I'm like,
hey, this is exercise.
Yeah, I'm using limbs in,
You're raising the roof.
I'm raising the roof.
Yeah, fair.
That's exercise, Gray.
Have you seen the phone swingers that they've got? In China, they use them with certain competitions or things, and you put your phone in the swinger and just
so you get more steps.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to Google that.
You win the competition, or you get credit, or you like someone will plant a tree or something.
This is what it's come to. We now have virtual devices virtualizing our.
Oh, God. Lazy. We can't even do our own stuff.
I can't wait till
I automate it?
That's a great lead into Focus. Can we?
Oh, yeah.
Well played.
I like Focus, because I've been working in a country where there are lanes in certain cities for cell phone zombies. There are lanes for the
like on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people that are doing this.
Bad over there. Okay, people are so addicted to their phones. And because half of these people have never had an electronic device, and suddenly they're like, oh my gosh, a smartphone. And they need to focus so badly. I mean, I purposely never want to be a slave to any of my devices, even though I love tech and I can't get enough of it. But that's all the more reason to want to have some balance. And I think the Focus is pretty cool. I think it's going to help a lot. And kudos to Apple to try to help, even though they're making the devices that are making us totally addicted and becoming zombies and slaves to our tech, but at least now they're giving us an option, to control it. And the coolest thing about it is it allows you to decide, okay, I'm in work mode now. I do want to accept calls and messages from certain people because that's work related. That's like a game changer for me. The thing is, when I turn off Do Not Disturb, the problem is sometimes I needed to get messages for work. There's something important or a call. I don't want to lose that. So they've now made it possible to get the calls and messages from people that you need, depending on what you're doing.
You can customize your notifications. You can either they have some set ones right now, which are work and personal and some things like that. But then, of course, you can make your own customized one. So that's really cool because you can also just set the timing of it too. So if you want to set it to more work mode and say, okay, I need emails from this email account coming in. I need texts too, because so much of work now is texting with colleagues. I need that coming in. I need certain calls to come in, but everything else from my social accounts or whatever needs to be quiet now. And maybe I just want an update at noon because that's when I'm going to take my lunch. And maybe I just want an update at 6 p.m. or whatever it is. And you can set them. So that's really helpful, I think. I'll be curious to see how many people use it because I'm definitely going to be using that with you, Jerome.
Yeah, it's well thought out. They've thought of all the situations where you do want to get alerts and why, and so it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I though have one difficult question for myself, and is, do I add my mom's phone calls to this? Because I'm doing a work day, and I hate to say it, my parents are getting a bit older. I love my parents very much, but I answer the phone thinking, oh my God, is something happened to somebody?
Yes.
And it's 10 a.m. and I'm about to go into the meeting, and I'm like, what? I have to accept this call from my mother. And she just says, do you like grapefruit? It's Sure. I'm kind of busy. I'm about to go and do me. Oh, okay, give me a call later. I was like, so do I add that to the list of people that I accept calls from?
My mother did call while we were recording this show.
Oh,
Every
he
I got a
time.
text
Gray.
message saying, sorry, hope you're okay. Love you. Mom.
Every time. Oh, so Gray, you bring up a good point. The other thing we failed to mention is, because this happens to Gray like clockwork every Tuesday, the other thing is it will, in certain apps, automatically send a notification to that party to say, like, so-and-so's not available or so-and-so is doing this right now and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you'll be able to customize the message too, like, whatever. But
Asia
mine
is
are
doing
always,
yard work.
yeah, Tasha's getting her, closing her ring so she can't talk. But mine are always like, hey, what are you doing? That's the call I get. I'm like, well, it's 1 p.m. on a Wednesday.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, if you were in China, you'd be
Best.
napping after lunch.
Oh,
Exactly.
That's something I can get behind. So,
Yes.
BlackBerry actually had a feature similar to this a few years ago. They had their balance feature, right? And it separated your phone into personal and into work. And it actually changed the whole look of the phone. They changed the apps that were available, and I think it changed what your priority messaging program was. And it seemed like a great idea. And I guess because BlackBerry was sort of on the decline at the time, it never really caught on. But being able to customize this, I'd
Yes.
love for them to take it to that next step and be able to have, one button. This is my work phone. Here are all of the apps that I use for that. I've got Slack up front. I've got Outlook up front, and I'm done for the workday. Boom! I can pop this over. Now I've got Discord up there. I've got Twitch up there. Like, just make it a little bit more customizable and obviously a little bit more effective. I think the notifications thing is a great start, though.
you can switch from one set of distractions to another set of distractions.
Focus distractions.
Exactly. So, believe it or not, there was yet another operating system that didn't get a lot of airtime at the WWDC21 keynote, and that was tvOS, which powers the Apple TV. So actually, sorry, one last note about the focus. That is another one of those features that I believe works across the multiple platforms.
Yes.
So this is macOS, iOS, iPadOS. I don't think it's making its way to it might be watchOS. I'm not 100% sure. Probably not tvOS yet, because they want you to watch Apple TV Plus. But Apple TV, tvOS, the SharePlay feature as well that we talked about a little earlier, something called For All of You, which you can browse a new row in the Apple TV app to find something that everyone in the house can't wait to watch. So it's more group watching features. Shared with You, so there's adding some social features, people sharing through iMessage platform, different recommendations for movies and TV shows. Spatial audio, smart AirPods routing, just making it a little easier to get audio to your AirPods, HomeKit camera enhancements, and room-filling stereo sound with 2 HomePod mini speakers. So being able to do what the regular HomePods have been able to do for a little while. Now, Graham, you are an avid Apple TV user. What do you think about these small but helpful updates?
Oh, this is just checking boxes, and it's great. These are boxes that needed to be checked. Like SharePlay, obviously, I think we're all behind. For all of you, that's a great little feature. When Ray and I are trying to find something to watch, we have a bang splody factor, and like, how much bang splody does it have? If it's got too much bang splody, we're not watching it. So if were able to quantify that would be great. The spatial audio is something that when they first brought out spatial audio for the iPhone and the iPad with the AirPods Pro, we were all kind of hoping, like, will the Apple TV have this? And everyone sort of went, well, yeah, probably won't, because there's just, how are you measuring positioning with this? And so now we're starting to see that it can do it. And I don't know if it's obviously like, it might have something to do with the H1 chip is what they're saying, but they're actually able to see positionally where your AirPods Pro are, and they're able to give you that spatial audio where you turn your head and it's coming out from the side. This is an awesome feature on iPad that I've been using. When you're watching something and someone kind of gestures to you, you look away and you hear the sound shift from where it's coming. It's just a really cool, neat feature. The smart AirPods routing, right now, if you've got AirPods, you grab your Apple remote, you hit the TV button, you hold it down, it brings out the user slider, you go down, you go to the AirPlay button, and you AirPlay to your AirPods. It's too many steps. And I think a lot of folks don't even know to do that. They actually go right into the system preferences, or the settings, pardon me, and they go down to Bluetooth, and they pair. And that just felt so clunky and so un-Apple. On your phone, you flip the top up and you pull it out, and it should work. The thing with the TV is you probably got your phone and your iPad somewhere nearby, so this is a great way to say, route it over here. That's smart. There are a lot of really cool things, like the room filling stereo sound for folks who are buying, like the HomePod Mini is such a great little device for the small price you pay. Nothing for me. I mean, I've got a Sonos Arc and whatnot over there. But I think for a lot of folks out there, these two little things, especially the fact that they're also thread routers, it's just like so. This is, it's funny. We're talking about the ecosystem, right? And everyone says, well, you got locked in with the apps. This is Apple, I think, basically very quietly just staring everybody else in the eyes and going, we're not locking you with the apps. We're locking you in with everything else. This whole thing works so well together that, sure, you could go and replace it, but this is the thing.
No one leaves the firm. So moving along from the Apple TV updates is some additional home updates. It's the HomeKit and Siri coming to third-party devices for the first time. And Graham, you are a Sonos user, and Sonos started supporting, was it Google Assistant in the last couple of years?
And Alexa.
And Alexa. So Apple's throwing their hat in the ring here and actually opening Siri up to other devices, much to Tasia's delight, apparently.
I don't have any of the microphones turned on any of my Sonos stuff. I got a Move here. I've got a Roam there. I've got an Arc over there. Microphones are all off because they go through to either Google or they go through to Amazon. Not a chance. No, the way that they've done this is it's secure. They take the recording, they send it through to your home base station, so your Apple TV or your HomePod, and that sends that out to Apple. That works for me.
I'm just going to leave this here that we can stare at it. Oh, good old Siri. Now, so they've also added voice recognition sort of throughout the home as well. I think like certain HomePods can currently detect one user versus another in the home to add calendar events to the appropriate calendar and whatnot. One other feature, and I thought, Graham, I know that you're Mr. Package, you can. The HomeKit and the Home app can now even detect when you receive a package at your house and alert you. So, and then adding camera function to the connecting your cameras to your Apple TV as well. So again, this kind of ties into what you're talking about, Graham, the whole ecosystem. Are you excited about the package alerts?
Am I ever? I've got actually, I'm going to see if I can find a picture of this, but my friend Curtis has taken a Ring camera, and because his doorway is so close to where the camera is, it's a very small vestibule, he hooked up a small mirror to it so that it actually reflects down so you can see when packages arrive. And so I can only imagine, here's the thing, he's an Android guy, so we're going to have to say, like, wow. This would be so much easier if you were, but maybe this is the gateway drug for him. But it's interesting. It's like I've just been in the process of getting a Canada Post box put in downstairs because package delivery is 50-50, right? Like sometimes they will come up to where the apartment is. Sometimes it ends up in the mailroom. Sometimes it ends up on Hastings Street, like my Thanksgiving dinner. Thanks so much, Chef's Plate.
Boo.
So that's the highlights of WWDC 21. We'll have lots of links in the show notes. But before we wrap up our just over an hour together here, I just want to touch real quickly on some projects. First, let's start with Jarome, because Jarome, you have your production studio in Beijing. Can you tell us about some of the kinds of work you do there? And now here.
Yeah, we're doing quite a bit of work on games, localizing games, sometimes apps, and then getting into post-production with film, doing work with film. Our website is terribly out of date, but we had a very, very busy month last month. We had 6 different games we were working on at once. So I can't say too much about them, unfortunately. Under strict non-disclosure for those, but
there's a big one right on your homepage, though. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, FIFA 21. That was our big cooperation with EA, starting with EA. So I'm sure we'll do many more things together with them in the future. Working out of the Spain office, actually, I'm hoping to do something with Vancouver, but the localizing work is done out of Spain. And we did one game I can mention we did, which is pretty cool, is WCR9 World Rally Racing game, which was it sounds pretty cool, and so like that kind of thing. And but then we do a number of Chinese films too, which involve not just localizing in basic recording and audio, but like all the sound design, Foley and mixing, surround mixing and stuff like that. So we just finished a film which is now going to be launched later this year, which is a romantic drama, but it heavily features AI. Like what would happen if you could swallow a pill full of nanobots that would allow you to tell if your partner was telling the truth or not. Very interesting stuff.
Bill Gates.
So, some very interesting sound design and stuff we got to do for that. And that's a Chinese film actually with a foreign director, possibly also going to be launched in overseas North America here this year later, but that's up. I'm not sure about that. But the approval process for the films in China is just something in a whole other episode we could do if you want, of how to get that and what goes on to get your film approved with the censors and all that. So
well, we've officially now been blocked in China. Thank you.
Everything's blocked in China. It's so nice to use free internet here because nothing works over there. As far as the internet, nothing works properly.
Quick question for you, Jerome. I think I get the gist of localization, but could you maybe explain, like on FIFA 21, what kind of localization you might do? Is it just language elements, or is it actual sound or the music? Like, what would your involvement be on localization?
It's
different
mostly
kind of
like bringing Chinese actors in and doing all the voice work, voice directing and recording for anything with audio that needs to be in Chinese. So in this case, we brought two famous commentators who work in the sports industry, and we had them do the commentating for the game. And so that's the kind of thing we did for FIFA. So in the case of a Marvel game we did, it was like casting characters like Star-Lord and like Gamora and Doctor Strange, the Chinese version, which is tricky because they don't have a New York accent, or whatever you call it, New Jersey accent over there. So, that's a tricky thing. But Marvel, they liked and approved all the talent we sent them for those characters, and so it was pretty fun and record like the Chinese Hulk, and stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, mentioning Marvel, you just guaranteed a return visit sometime, Drew.
Yes. I gotta use everything I can.
So you can find out more about Jarome Matthew's various enterprises at www.prosoul.com or www.jarome.com, and that's JAROME. William, you've got some new beats for us this week. What's going on there?
I do, and I'd love Jerome to listen to them sometime too. So I've got a new looper coming out, or it's out, and it's on the Table Beats app. It's soon to be out on tabletist.net. And basically, this is a bit of a switch for me. And as the title says, heavy. That's the name of the looper. Heavy.
Yeah,
so they're
heavy.
It's a little bit more bassy, more, I guess, darker might actually be a better way of saying it.
Sounds pretty dark, yeah.
Yeah, pretty dark. Some of them are a little fast. So I just trying to expand my range a little bit, create a little bit different. I've done almost 100 loops on table beats. So I wanted to try something different and challenge myself. So I wanted to try something outside of my 90 BPM sort of light and jazzy. So I tried something a little bit different. So I hope everyone out there listens to it and enjoys it.
So to check out Will's work there, you go to tablebeats.com and there's a link to the app. It's much easier to find stuff using the app for iOS. They maybe have an Android one. I didn't look because
they do have it. Yeah, they do have an Android one, and people complain about it endlessly. And he keeps on saying, "I don't get paid to do this, and I will update it eventually."
And once you get the Table Beats app up and running, the interface heads up is a little dense. And anyone that's like over 45 is like going to have trouble like reading some of the tiny elements. So get your readers, your reading glasses out, and and you want to go to library. There's a little in the middle. There's library, and then you search for the username Molotov, and that's Will. It's MOLOTOV, and then you can find Heavy in there. And then what was your previous one? One of your previous ones called Will?
I have a whole series called
Fresh
Level
Coast?
Up.
Okay.
Level Up Loopers, and then I
Okay.
also did have a sort of one-off one that was called Fresh Coast as well.
Right. Yeah. So good stuff. Yeah, and it's much easier to enjoy those loops on the app. And it's funny because they're only maybe like 8 bars, 16 bars or something, and you just you play them, and it's like you find yourself like, oh wow, this has been going for like 10 minutes, and I didn't even realize like you get in the zone doing work or whatever. So handy for that too, for productivity purposes. So that's, you can be a little niche market there. And Tasia, you have another video for us that before the video that's coming out about all the stuff we just talked about. But what was this past week's video about?
This past week's video was what to do now that Google Photos is no longer free. And I just explain everybody's options, what their options are, because there are some options. Oh, there's the face. See? And there are options. So some people don't know that, and some people are panicking or wanting to jump ship or not knowing. And also, it's just really cheap to upgrade, so you could just do that too.
Burn!
I forgot to mute the video, but while I was playing it, it didn't come through the stream, but it went into my ears, and that scream went right into my ears. I kind of forgot about that. So
I think it's like $3 to upgrade. It's like $3.
Yeah, I mean it's $1.99 US. So in
like
Canada,
every month, every single month, they have to pay for something.
But it's 100 gigabytes, and that's across your entire Google Drive. So it's not just for Google Photos. Right. So
what a concept! Actually, having to pay a bit of money to get something of value.
We've had it free for so long, I cannot even believe. But yeah, that's what the video is about. But the one coming out this week will be on. I picked. I kind of doing what to expect from iOS 15, but I've done it in like a little top 10 list of just my top 10 favorite iOS 15 features.
Coming
soon.
And
then also today, I released episode 2 of my podcast called Talk Techie to Me. I didn't give you a link, sorry.
You snooze, you lose.
Thank you. It's called Talk Techie to Me. You can head to TasiaCustodi.com/Talk Techie to Me podcast.
There we go.
And the latest episode is a tech roundup where I've picked top 3 stories of the last week, and I go through each story in 2 minutes or less to keep it fresh. Yeah. So you can listen and discover what I talk about there. I won't tell you here. It'll be a secret.
I'm intrigued. I'm going to TasiaCustodi.com/Talk Techie to Me.
Talk Techie to Me podcast.
Boom.
Awesome. And Graham, you had a decidedly untech weekend. What were you up to that it was on the bubble whether or not you were going to be able to join us, and you just slid in at the last minute. But what were you up to?
I actually went to a place just off of Harrison Lake called Camp Cove. And so it actually was quite techy. I've got a ShiftPod tent, which they were developed for Burning Man. These things are absolutely incredible. And so for the first time, we were able to link up 2 of them. They also have these vestibules that can also act as a tunnel between them. It's like a habit trail for humans.
Cool.
Yeah. I've got a picture. I'll bring it up next time. But just a really nice getaway. I had some friends who were looking at me yesterday like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. They're like, oh, you're relaxed. We haven't seen that in months. So
you were offline.
It's been nice.
Yeah.
I did. I won't lie. I did. There it is.
Cool.
There it is.
Oh, cool. I don't even recognize you.
That's right.
You're so relaxed.
Happy. I did take an hour and a half out to watch the keynote. So
you should have told me, because we usually have our tradition where we're just texting back and forth, making snarky comments.
So here's
I was trying to give you some space.
I had 1 bar of LTE.
Oh, okay.
So everything that came in addition was stalling it out. So I put it on Do Not Disturb and just.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll try not to be offended. Good stuff. It's important we talked about mental health last week. It's a good time to disconnect a little bit, even if you have to reconnect to watch an Apple keynote once in a while.
I booked my camping trips. I'm ready.
All right.
We might run into each other this year. So,
So thank you very much to Gray Williams, Will Silver, Tasia Custodi, and special guest Jarome Matthew. You can find out more about Momentous at momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv, instagram.com/momentous.tv, and on YouTube, good luck. You can search around. Maybe search for my name.
So bitter, TJ.
We have a LinkedIn page as well. You know, I'm going to put something on there someday. Thanks, guys. Looking forward
Thank
to
you.
talking to you next
pleasure.
week. And on the on the count of three, we've got to do the sound. 1,
Okay.
2, 3.